HOA Karen calls 911 after I stop her using my driveway as a public road. I never thought I'd be writing one of these stories, but here we are. I've lived in my house in the Oakwood Heights subdivision for the past 5 years. It's a nice neighborhood with well-maintained homes, and while we do have an HOA, it hadn't been particularly problematic until Karen took over as president 6 months ago. My house sits at an interesting spot in the neighborhood. While most homes are arranged in a typical suburban grid pattern, my property has a long private driveway that connects to both Oak Street and Maple Drive. When I bought the house, I actually really liked this feature. It gave me 2 different routes to get home depending on traffic. What I didn't realize was that some neighbors had been using it as a shortcut between the streets for years before I moved in. At first, I didn't mind too much. A car would occasionally cut through, and while it was technically trespassing, it wasn't frequent enough to really bother me. That all changed when Karen became HOA president. Karen lives on Maple Drive, about 3 houses down from where my driveway connects to it. She works from home selling essential oils or something, and apparently my driveway became her personal expressway to get to the main road faster. I started noticing her white Tesla Model Y driving through multiple times a day. One Saturday morning, I was doing yard work when she zoomed through, and I decided to wave her down. She reluctantly stopped, rolling down her window with an annoyed expression. "Hi, Karen. I wanted to talk to you about using my driveway as a cut-through," I said politely. She looked at me like I had 3 heads. "What do you mean, your driveway? This is a neighborhood access road." I blinked in surprise. "No, it's actually my private property. It's part of my lot." Karen laughed dismissively. "Don't be ridiculous. This road has been here for years. It's essential for the community. I understand it's convenient, but it's not a public road. It's my private driveway, and I'd appreciate if you'd stop using it as a shortcut." Her face turned red. "I am the HOA president, and I'm telling you this is a community access road under HOA jurisdiction. You can't restrict access to it." "Actually, I can. I have the property documents that clearly show." She cut me off. "We'll see about that," and sped off, leaving tire marks on my driveway. That evening, I received an email from Karen in her official HOA president capacity, claiming that my driveway was designated as a neighborhood thoroughfare and demanding I cease and desist any attempts to restrict community access. The email was full of legal-sounding language that I'm pretty sure she copied from Google. I replied with scanned copies of my property documents, deed, and a satellite image clearly showing the driveway as part of my lot. I also attached the relevant section of the HOA bylaws, which said nothing about any community access roads or easements on my property. Karen's response? "This will be discussed at the next HOA meeting." The next day, I installed security cameras covering both ends of the driveway. I also ordered some removable bollards, those sturdy posts you can put up and take down to block vehicle access. They arrived a few days later, and I installed them at both ends of the driveway, making sure they were clearly visible and reflective for safety. The morning after I installed the bollards, I was working from home when I heard screeching tires and angry honking. I checked my security camera feed to see Karen's Tesla stopped at the bollards. She was laying on the horn like it would somehow make the posts magically disappear. I decided to ignore her, but a few minutes later, my doorbell started ringing repeatedly. I opened the door to find Karen, face purple with rage. "Remove these posts immediately," she shrieked. "You're breaking HOA regulations and blocking an essential community road." "Karen, we've been over this. It's my private driveway, not a public road. I have every right to restrict access. This is completely unacceptable. People rely on this road." "No, they don't. It's my property, and I'm tired of people using it as a shortcut." "You'll be hearing from the HOA's lawyer," she threatened. I smiled. "Great. I look forward to showing them my property documents." She stormed off, and I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. About an hour later, I heard sirens. Looking outside, I saw 2 police cars pulling up to my house. Karen was standing there with a smug expression as 3 officers approached my door. "Sir, we received a report that you've illegally blocked a public road," one officer said when I answered. "Actually, officer, this is my private driveway. I have all the documentation right here," I replied calmly, retrieving my folder of property documents. The officers reviewed my paperwork while Karen stood nearby, tapping her foot impatiently. One officer pulled up the county property records on his phone, confirming everything I was showing them. "Ma'am," the senior officer turned to Karen, "this is clearly a private driveway, not a public road. The owner has every right to restrict access to their property. But it's been used as a road for years. It's a community necessity," Karen sputtered. "That doesn't make it public property," the officer explained. "And making a false report about a blocked public road is a serious matter." Karen's face went from red to white. "I didn't make a false report. This is discrimination. I'm the HOA president." "Ma'am, HOA president or not, you called 911 to report a blocked public road where none exists. That's misuse of emergency services." I showed the officers my security camera footage of Karen's previous confrontations and her multiple attempts to use the driveway after being explicitly told not to. They took notes and copies of everything. "Would you like to press trespassing charges?" one officer asked me. Karen's eyes went wide. I thought about it for a moment. "Not at this time, but I would like it documented that she's been formally warned about trespassing." The officers issued Karen a citation for misuse of emergency services and gave her a formal warning about trespassing. They advised her that any further attempts to use my driveway would result in criminal charges. As the police left, Karen stood there looking shell-shocked. "This isn't over," she muttered before stalking away. She was right, it wasn't over, but not in the way she thought. The next day, I received notice of an emergency HOA meeting to discuss my unauthorized modifications to my property. I showed up prepared with copies of all my documentation for every board member and homeowner present. Karen tried to paint me as a troublemaker who was disrupting the community. "This road has been used by residents for years. He's destroying property values and community access." I calmly presented my case, showing my property documents, the police report, and video evidence of Karen's behavior. I also pointed out that there was nothing in the HOA bylaws about my driveway being a community access point. Furthermore, I added, I have documentation of Karen attempting to abuse her position as HOA president to force me to allow her to trespass on my property. I also have evidence of her making false claims to law enforcement about my property. The other board members looked increasingly uncomfortable as I laid out my case. One of them, Tom, spoke up. "Karen, did you really call 911 about this?" "I was protecting community interests," she insisted. "By lying to the police about a public road that doesn't exist?" another board member asked. The meeting quickly turned against Karen. Other homeowners started sharing stories of her overreach and abuse of power in her short time as president. It turned out I wasn't the only one she'd been harassing. By the end of the meeting, a motion was raised to remove Karen as HOA president. It passed overwhelmingly. Karen stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture fell off the wall. But even that wasn't the end. A week later, I received a letter from a lawyer representing Karen, threatening to sue me for intentional infliction of emotional distress and destruction of community property rights. The letter was poorly written and cited irrelevant laws, clearly the work of a bargain basement lawyer. I forwarded the letter to my own attorney, who laughed out loud when she read it. She sent a response that thoroughly demolished every claim in Karen's letter, included copies of all my documentation and the police report, and warned that any further harassment would result in legal action against both Karen and her attorney for malicious prosecution. We never heard from Karen's lawyer again. Karen put her house up for sale the following month. Apparently, she couldn't handle living in a community where she couldn't get her way. The day her moving truck pulled away, several neighbors gathered in their driveways to wave goodbye, with all middle fingers firmly raised. I kept the bollards up, but I did make one change. I installed an electronic gate system that lets me raise and lower them from my phone. It's actually more convenient than the manual posts, and it looks nicer too. The HOA's new president, Tom, fully supported this attractive security upgrade to my property. These days, my driveway is peaceful and private, just as it should be. The only vehicles that use it are mine and my invited guests. The neighborhood is much calmer without Karen's constant drama, and property values have actually gone up since she left. Sometimes I see posts from the community Facebook group where she moved to, warning others about her behavior. Apparently, she tried to pull similar stunts in her new neighborhood, but got shut down quickly when residents Googled her name and found posts about her history here. The best part? The costs of my security cameras, bollards, and electronic gate system were all tax deductible as home security improvements. So not only did I win the battle, but I also got a nice little tax break out of it. I still can't believe someone would be entitled enough to call 911 over not being able to use my private driveway as their personal shortcut. But I guess some people really do think the world revolves around them. At least this story had a satisfying ending. Karen lost her position, her credibility, and ultimately had to move away, while I gained better security for my property and the respect of my neighbors. The new HOA board is much more reasonable, focusing on actual community improvements rather than power trips. They even used my situation as a reason to review and update the HOA bylaws to prevent future abuse of power by board members. Last week, I overheard some newer residents talking about the Karen incident like it's neighborhood legend. They got most of the details wrong, making it sound even more dramatic than it actually was, but I didn't bother correcting them. Sometimes a good cautionary tale is worth its weight in gold. For anyone dealing with similar situations, my advice is simple: document everything, know your rights, and don't back down when you're in the right. HOA presidents might have some power, but they're not above the law, and they certainly can't claim your private property as public space just because they want a shortcut to Starbucks. Oh, and invest in security cameras. They're worth every penny, even if you never need the footage. In my case, having video evidence of Karen's behavior made all the difference in resolving the situation quickly and decisively. The funny thing is, if Karen had just asked politely in the beginning, I might have been willing to work something out. Maybe a limited access agreement for emergencies or something. But her entitled attitude and attempts to bully me ensured that would never happen. I heard through the grapevine that Karen's new HOA recently changed their bylaws specifically to prevent someone with a history of HOA-related conflicts from serving on the board. They didn't name her specifically, but everyone knows who inspired that rule. These days, when I look out at my peaceful private driveway with its sleek electronic gates, I can't help but smile. Sometimes standing your ground against entitled people costs money and creates stress, but the long-term satisfaction of maintaining your rights and dignity is priceless. And to think, all of this drama could have been avoided if Karen had just taken the extra 2 minutes to drive around the block like everyone else. I guess some people have to learn the hard way that their convenience doesn't trump other people's property rights. The whole experience taught me a valuable lesson about standing up for myself and not letting others bully me, even when they hold positions of authority. It also showed me the importance of having a good relationship with my neighbors. The support I received from the community during this ordeal was truly heartening. These days, whenever I press the button to lower my electronic gates, I think about Karen and smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about standing firm, knowing your rights, and watching karma do its work. The new neighbors who bought Karen's old house are lovely people who actually apologized for her behavior, even though they had nothing to do with it. They even brought over a bottle of wine as a sorry about the previous owner gift. We had a good laugh about it, and now they're some of our closest friends in the neighborhood. Life has a funny way of working things out sometimes. What started as a stressful confrontation with an entitled neighbor ended up strengthening our community and making our neighborhood a better place to live. Sometimes you have to go through a little chaos to reach a better order. As for Karen, last I heard she's already having issues with her new HOA. Some people never learn, but at least she's someone else's problem now. Meanwhile, I've got my peaceful driveway, supportive neighbors, and the satisfaction of knowing I stood up for what was right. And that's worth more than any shortcut. Update: It's been 6 months since my original post, and a lot has happened that I think you all might find interesting. Grab some popcorn because Karen's saga isn't quite over. Remember how I mentioned that Karen moved to a new neighborhood and was already causing problems there? Well, it turns out her new community is even less tolerant of her antics than we were. I know this because she tried to sue me for defamation, claiming my false statements about her made it impossible for her to maintain her status and reputation in her new community. Here's what happened. About 2 months after she moved, I received another legal notice, this time from a different lawyer. This one looked more professional than the last, but it was still full of ridiculous claims. According to the letter, my slanderous statements and malicious sharing of private information had caused Karen to suffer severe emotional distress and significant damage to her reputation. The lawsuit claimed that because people in her new community had found posts about her behavior here, remember those Facebook warnings I mentioned, she was unable to run for their HOA board. She was demanding $75,000 in damages for loss of position, emotional distress, and damage to reputation. I immediately contacted my lawyer, who was actually excited about this case. This is a textbook example of a frivolous lawsuit, she told me. Everything you said was true, and we have documentation to prove it. Plus, she's a public figure in the context of HOA leadership, which gives you even more protection. My lawyer filed a motion to dismiss and a countersuit for malicious prosecution. She also included a demand for Karen to pay all my legal fees. The best part? She subpoenaed all the records from Karen's new HOA about why she wasn't allowed to run for the board. That's when things got really interesting. Turns out Karen's new HOA had done their homework. They had screenshots of her social media posts bragging about how she was going to take over their community and show them how a real HOA should be run. They also had copies of complaints from her previous neighborhoods, not just ours, but 2 others before that. Yes, Karen had a history of HOA drama going back nearly a decade. The judge assigned to the case was not amused. During the first hearing, Karen tried to argue that she was just a concerned citizen trying to maintain community standards. The judge interrupted her and asked, "Ma'am, are you suggesting that calling 911 to report a non-existent blocked public road was maintaining community standards?" Karen's lawyer tried to argue that she genuinely believed my driveway was a public road, but that fell apart when my lawyer presented the property documents and Karen's own emails acknowledging them. The judge was particularly interested in the timeline showing she called 911 after receiving proof that the driveway was private property. So, the judge said, you received legal documentation showing the driveway was private property, and your response was to call emergency services and report a fake crime. Karen's lawyer tried to change the subject to my damaging statements about her, but my lawyer was ready. She presented the police report, the HOA meeting minutes, and video evidence of Karen's behavior. Every damaging statement I had made was proven true with documentation. The judge dismissed Karen's lawsuit with prejudice, meaning she can't refile it. But that's not the best part. The judge also granted our countersuit, ordering Karen to pay all my legal fees plus $10,000 in punitive damages for bringing a frivolous lawsuit. Karen burst into tears in the courtroom, claiming she was being persecuted. The judge wasn't having it. "Ma'am," he said, "you have a documented history of harassing neighbors and abusing HOA authority. Then, when called out on your behavior, you tried to use the legal system to silence legitimate criticism. This stops now." But wait, there's more. Remember that lawyer who sent the first threatening letter about community property rights? My lawyer reported him to the State Bar Association for failing to perform due diligence before sending legally unsound threats. He received a formal reprimand and had to take additional ethics training. Karen's new lawyer dropped her as a client after the hearing, citing irreconcilable differences in their attorney-client relationship. I'm pretty sure that's lawyer speak for, "This client is crazy and I'm not dealing with it anymore." The story spread through both neighborhoods like wildfire. My neighbors threw a justice-served barbecue, where we all shared our favorite Karen stories. Someone even made t-shirts with private driveway, public justice printed on them. I have one framed in my home office now. The electronic gates I installed have become something of a neighborhood landmark. Several other homeowners have asked for the contractor's information, and the HOA is considering adding similar gates to our community pool area. Tom, our new HOA president, jokes that we should put up a plaque, the Karen Memorial Gates, a monument to standing up to entitlement. Karen tried to appeal the judge's decision, but her appeal was denied. She was ordered to pay additional fees for filing a frivolous appeal. When she couldn't pay immediately, the court placed a lien on her new house. This led to even more drama in her new neighborhood. Apparently, having a lien on your property violates their HOA bylaws. She had to take out a second mortgage to pay off the judgment and keep her house. I almost felt bad about that, almost. Then I remembered how she tried to steal my property and falsely report me to the police. The whole experience has had some unexpected positive effects on our community. The HOA board now requires all new board members to take a basic property law course. They've also established clear guidelines for handling disputes between neighbors, with a focus on documentation and mediation before taking any official action. We've become something of a model for other HOAs in the area. Tom has been invited to speak at several HOA conferences about preventing abuse of power and maintaining proper boundaries. He always uses my case as an example, with my permission, of course. The security company that installed my gate system asked if they could use my story in their marketing materials. I agreed, and they gave me a lifetime maintenance contract in exchange. They've gotten quite a bit of business from it. Turns out lots of people have problems with neighbors using their driveways as shortcuts. Karen's new community has completely frozen her out. They changed their bylaws to require board members to disclose any past HOA-related legal issues, and they added specific provisions about respecting private property boundaries. They even cited my case in their amended bylaws as an example of prohibited behavior. I've started getting letters and emails from people all over the country who've had similar problems with entitled neighbors and HOA overreach. Many of them have used my story as inspiration to stand up for their own property rights. It's weird but satisfying to know that Karen's ridiculous behavior helped others learn to defend themselves. My lawyer says she's added a section about HOA law to her practice because of all the referrals she's gotten from my case. She calls it the Karen effect, when one entitled person's actions lead to positive systemic changes that prevent future abuse. The police officers who responded to Karen's 911 call now use the incident in their training sessions about handling false reports and HOA disputes. They've told me it's a perfect example of how to document everything and maintain calm when dealing with aggressive people who think they have authority they don't actually possess. Last week, I got an anonymous letter in the mail. It was from someone in Karen's new neighborhood, thanking me for standing up to her and sharing my story. Apparently, she's still trying to take over their community, but nobody takes her seriously anymore. The letter included a gift card to Home Depot with a note saying, "For maintenance on those beautiful gates that started it all." Karen recently tried to start a website about HOA reform, claiming she was a victim of community persecution. It backfired spectacularly when people found it and started sharing their own stories about her behavior. The website disappeared within a week. The county records office now includes a special note about my driveway in their property database, specifically stating it's private property with no public easement. They added this after getting multiple calls from Karen's new lawyer trying to find some loophole to support her claims. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground. It would have been easier to give in when Karen first started her campaign of harassment, but that would have just encouraged her behavior. Instead, standing up to her not only protected my property rights, but also helped create positive changes in multiple communities. My property values have actually increased more than the neighborhood average, partly because of the security upgrades. Real estate agents now highlight the private, gated driveway as a premium feature when showing houses nearby. Ironically, Karen's attempts to devalue my property by claiming I was destroying community access had the opposite effect. The electronic gates have worked flawlessly, and I've added some landscaping around them that makes them look like they were always meant to be there. Every time I press the button to open them, I think about how sometimes the best revenge is simply living well and standing firm in your rights. Karen's old house finally sold at a significantly lower price than market value. The new owners told me they got a great deal because the listing agent was required to disclose the recent HOA-related disputes involving the previous owner. They thought it was hilarious when they learned the full story. These days, our neighborhood is peaceful and drama-free. The HOA focuses on actual community improvements instead of power trips, and neighbors respect each other's property rights. Sometimes new residents ask about the driveway incident, and it's become a sort of neighborhood legend. I've learned that standing up to bullies, even when they have titles like HOA president, is always worth it in the long run. It might be stressful and costly in the short term, but the satisfaction of maintaining your rights and dignity is priceless. And to Karen, if you're somehow reading this, the gates are still up, they're still legal, and they're still keeping you out. Maybe take this as a lesson that your convenience doesn't trump other people's property rights. But who am I kidding? You probably haven't learned a thing,